I, for one, feel very... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I gotta do the intro. Wow. Already our guest is stomping on our toes. Welcome to A Musician and a Filmmaker. This is our podcast where we talk about a lot of things, mostly Animal Collective and punk music and bad movies. But today we're joined by Animal Collective super fan and fan mix extraordinaire Ethan Woods, a.k.a. Walked Like a Dog, who made Reaper Madness, which is a remix slash fan live thing, whatever you want to call it, about the album Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper, which is the album we'll be discussing on this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
So you actually reached out to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that we have fans that don't pay us $5 a month.
We have some people listen to the show, and that's awesome. That's awesome news for us.
Yeah. Right before or last night, I listened to the Enema of the State episode. Greg, how you feeling about that record?
It kind of grew on me a little bit, but I'll be honest,
good.
like after I finished editing and posting that episode, I completely forgot it existed. So I didn't have any of the songs in my head anymore.
There's a period where I was talking with my friend Robbie about how there was a very specific pipeline from Blink-182 to Animal Collective. That Blink-182 in my mind is somehow the pop punk version of Animal Collective. I even who's that Instagram meme account? Oh, and Zane Johnny. I sent him a meme one time that was a picture of Travis Barker and Mark Hoppus with their shirts off, and I wrote A.V. Terror and Panda Bear on top of it. And he didn't post it, but he sent me a heart back on Instagram. So that was that was a big boost for my ego that particular day.
And I know exactly what AV and Panda picture you're referencing too.
Yeah,
they got the masks on. It's in black and white. Yeah.
Exactly. They're the same people. Same dynamic as far as I'm concerned.
Well, here's how I feel about the pipeline you mentioned is that even though Animal Collective songs mostly rely on like childhood and growing up, somehow Blink is more immature than that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's Blink-182 is like, I mean, like I feel like if we're drawing the comparison, Animal Collective manages to take that childhood, they reach into the back and they bring it into adulthood, whereas Blink-182 seems perfectly arrested at age 14. And they have no desire to ever transcend that age, or bring it into adulthood. No shade to Mark and Travis and whoever else.
No, you can throw shade at Mark. He's a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, he seems sort of weird. Oh, and Tom DeLonge. I kind of fuck with Tom DeLonge, to be honest. Yeah, I actually kind of fuck with him.
See, I already forgot which member is who. That's how little that album stuck with me.
I mean,
I agree. Tom's alien stuff, I'm all about it.
Yeah, fuck with it. Yeah, but my real question is, who's Avi and who's Panda? Is Mark? Who's Mark and who's Tom? Which one's which?
I would say Mark might be Avi and Tom would be Panda.
It's kind of what my instinct says too.
You know, because I think that they've got the Panda and Tom have the higher register. Obviously, two totally different sounds, but yeah, I think, and I don't know, in a weird way, like when I think of Blink-182's sound, I kind of think of Mark Hoppus more, as like a primary vocalist. I guess I feel the same way about A.V. Terror and Animal Collective. So.
Totally. Tom DeLonge comes in with the special, his particular special sauce, which is...
Yeah. Are you sure it shouldn't be reversed just by like virtue of their personalities? Because like the whole thing is like... A.V. is the weird one and Panda is the normie. So wouldn't you swap the two?
That's interesting.
Like if anyone was going to be into aliens, it'd be A.V. Terror.
Yeah, that's
personality-wise, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost as if like
they can't all be as straightforward as A.V. is John and Paul is Panda, even though I don't think A.V.'s ever done heroin outside of his Encyclopedia Britannica. Is that the name of the website?
Oh, yeah.
That article where he locks Deacon in the barn and they make centipedes and all that. Well, speaking of growing old, part of that is dying. And that brings us back to our album, which is Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper
from 2015. So a little background, at least for me, I was getting into the band like as this album was rolling out. So I think I probably listened to Merriweather maybe a week or two after the Mr. Noah EP dropped. So I was getting into their full discography by the time that the album dropped. And I think I listened to like the first song, and then I started Mr. Noah, the song, and it was too weird for what I was expecting. So I was like, and I just turned it off. But it quickly grew on me, and I listened to the whole thing. And then it got to the point where if I was all in the house by myself alone, I would just be singing Tropic of Cancer to get that reverb in the room, as opposed to, buying a pedal or whatever. But I should have gotten into it because I'm pretty sure he came to Dallas not too long after that on the tour, and I could have totally seen him live, but it was not meant to be, and I didn't see him till Painting With the next year in Tulsa. But
Yeah. I mean, not to give you FOMO about it, but those tours were incredible. I was actually going back in preparation for this, like watching all the old Grim Reaper promo videos. I mean, I guess maybe to give a little bit more context about where I'm at with my relation to that. I've been a fan since around 2004, and I'm not a super active poster on the Collected Animals board, but I've been lurking on that pretty consistently since then. So anyway, that's just to say that like I was like deep in the fandom by the time the Grim Reaper rollout began. And I remember all of this, like all the teasers, all the like lore that was like kind of being built up around that particular release. And then finally seeing Panda Bear play these tunes live with like, I mean, I think he must have just, I kind of get my shows confused, but I don't think he had, I think it was just like a flat screen behind him, and they're playing the Danny Perez visuals behind it. And the visuals from this era are just absolutely incredible. They're absolutely crazy. The sort of like red velvet cloaked Grim Reaper doing like weird undulating thrusty movements with their scythe. And like
it's like that weirdly commercial lighting for the more like abstract stuff in that classic Danny Perez style. Yeah. And I like that it was even so, memorable as visuals that he just straight up used that picture of the Grim Reaper as the cover for Swallow at the Hollow, the like leftovers compilation thing he put out.
Yeah.
So what was the release order? Did they put out the PBVSGR like DJ mix first? Or was it the EP, the Mr. Noah EP?
Right. Yeah. So as I remember it, this is just from memory. I don't totally remember. I didn't look into this that deeply, but like, as I remember it, like the way it happened was that there were all these like little teasers happening. I don't know like where like everybody got the Panda Bear versus Grim Reaper name. I remember that came out pretty early in the release cycle, but I don't think anybody knew what it was about. And then I think that mix, the Mixtix mix, was the very first thing anybody heard of it. And that was just mostly just like, like cool 90s house jams that Panda had put into a mix, like a DJ mix. And then he had just snuck in all these little like snippets of the songs throughout.
Sonic Boom isms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like all these, I mean, that's like something that's so fun about this whole era, and why I think this one is like maybe like it's not necessarily my favorite record, but it's definitely like my favorite experience I've ever had with the band, because the whole thing was just, particularly with Sonic Boom, it was just shrouded in this like really, really fun like alternate reality game mystery quality to it. Like Sonic Boom was on the boards, dropping weird riddles and like weird links to like photo websites, like like Photo Stack or whatever, I don't know, like Flickr, and be like, here's like this like random detail to be a corner of a whiteboard, and it would say something like sequential circuits on it, and you'd be like, what the fuck is this? What are you showing me right now?
Sequential circuits, and it's like, oh, it's just a synthesizer.
Right.
So it's one of those, it's like Brick from Anchorman. He's just looking around the room and seeing things. Like, I'm going to name, Boys Latin. I walk by that every day. I'll name a song that. hey, I went to the Lisbon Zoo. I'm going to name a song that and then put it on a download card for an EP that comes out months after the album.
Right. Yeah,
Which I do appreciate that
Bear.
everything he played live ended up getting a studio recording in some fashion. It would just be nice if that particular one was on streaming. So it sounds like you're receptive to Sonic Boom's production on this, because it seems like that's a controversial take. But this one specifically, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the phenomenon that is demoitis that comes from this band in particular and their solo acts, where they will play stuff live and then release it. So people will get used to the way it sounds live, and then whatever they changed in the studio will seem wrong or like out of place. And everyone really, because I think Sonic Boom, speaking of Collected Animals, lurks on there. I think he still posts on there, but back then he was posting constantly because they had this big, long Grim Reaper thread, as they do. And at some point, he uploaded a recording of a show that Panda did at the All Tomorrow's Parties festival, although it might have just been a rehearsal for his set.
Yeah, it was actually several different rehearsal
well, the first he only put out one at first, right?
You're
it was
right.
like
You're
the
right.
second take, and then the album and all that, and then it was like the Christmas that year he did another one on the forum, which I was there for. And in fact, I think I actually got a reply from Sonic Boom once. I was like, guys, this album's great. I love it. But am I the only one that feels like Selfish Gene is constantly threatening to drop the bass? And then he replied to me and went, dropped out of their tiny little minds. And I was like, that's not what does that mean? I don't know what that means. That was like when someone asked Harmony Korine if he prefers digital or film. And he's like, hey, man, whatever works, it's all good. They're like, that's not an answer. But yeah, it is funny to open the vinyl and be like, oh, a lyric sheet. Oh, no. It's just weird little sentence fragments from Sonic Boom with whatever was going through his head that day.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to what I was saying. The like weird, glitchy, stripped down, very little reverby production of the ATP recording was what people got used to, so that when the album came out, they felt disappointed. And personally, I don't really give a shit. I don't think they're that different. If anything, I think the album sounds better. That being said, I still do take off on the streaming versions, both Sonic Boom pinned transition pieces, the Shadow of the Colossus and Davy Jones' Locker, because fuck them. They completely ruin the flow of the album, and it's just harsh noise for the sake of harsh noise. If anything, I can deal with it on Principe Real, the song, only because I can't skip it. It's just part of the song, so it's okay. But it's also like that blends into the like sound palette of that. You can't have something as beautiful as Tropic of Cancer and Lonely Wanderer and then it sounds almost like he got like a rabid horse and then just put it through like a vocalizer. It's so it hurt. It's awful. So when I listen to it on the vinyl, I can't skip it, is my point.
Right.
But that's my only complaint about Sonic Boom's production. I personally think it's what he added to it is great. I mean, Panda said I want it to sound busy, and god damn it, does it sound busy as hell the whole way through, even both of the companion EPs and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like the Sonic Boomification of it all is really, I mean, it really changes the vibe a lot between the two. And those two transition tracks particularly, maybe we can get deeper into this particular aspect. I'm curious what you guys think, but I've always been kind of like what was the thought behind these two being included? Like I remember reading at some point, like, you know, and I feel like I don't need this to be like a literal thing, but like they were talking a lot when one of their interviews, they were talking about like the narrative of the record and why they chose the songs that they chose. And with this record, it strikes me as like that the sequencing strikes me as like really interesting in general, because there's just, first of all, like so many songs from this era. Like I think when I did Reaper Madness, I think it's like 21 songs, and they're all like, you know, 4 to 5 minute jams. So it's like hefty. And also all the songs, like, you know, not to rob them of any individual glory, but they also all are like so similar in a lot of ways, with the exception of like Lonely Wanderer and Tropic of Cancer. So there's this vibe with all of them where they almost feel like, I mean, I remember this was sort of like when I was making Reaper Madness, kind of like one of the things I think I was like interested in just messing with as a fan, was just like how much that this set of music felt sort of like all the songs existed in this same exact zone, in this way that like so few records before this like felt so deeply. Like obviously like all their records before this had like kind of a consistent production value, but like all of these songs are just sort of like the you know, like they're made from these like sample pack loops. They're all kind of like, you know, all pistons are firing for the entirety of the song. There's like very little like playing with like dynamics or like taking out instrumentation and putting it back in. Like it's, as soon as the song goes, it's kind of like the entirety
it's kind
of
of like
thing.
the wall of sound, Sonic Boom's version of that.
Right. So I've always been like kind of curious, like why they went with the songs, like what was the story they had in their head with the songs that they ended up putting on the record, and then like why they put these two noise tracks on the record itself. If
Well,
it like
the sequencing is interesting because it does seem like they are kind of grouped together. Like the first, I would say, 5 or 6 tracks are like sort of the like prime example of what the album sounds like. You know, like with Crosswords is very much a single, and Butcher Baker, Candlestick Maker, and I think it's interesting to see how that all gets sort of flanderized by the time Come to Your Senses comes around. And you're just like, Jesus, this is 2 minutes of wind noises at the end. Like, come on. The song already didn't have anything going on. Now it's literally next to nothing is happening. And it's just like, I get that they're trying to sort of like wind you down into Tropic of Cancer. But honestly, like most of the time when I would re-listen to this over the past 9 years, I would just skip Come to Your Senses because I'm like, I don't have time for this. I want to listen to something where something happens. Like, it would be okay if the song was like 3 minutes or whatever, but it's 7 minutes long, including the outro. So, I mean, going back to what you were saying, Ethan, it is interesting how stuff like that survives in, you know, the album form or in any of the various, like, you know, supplementary material that you were sort of able to use those little bits and pieces as transitions to sort of, you know, blend together stuff that didn't have a live transition or whatever. And it's also, I want to say, it's really impressive how you were able to take the order of the set of the ATP rehearsal and blend that with the album order of the tracks, and like that and all the EP stuff together. I think it flows better than the album in some places. Like, I forget sometimes that I'm listening to an 80-minute mix as opposed to a 40-minute LP. Especially the ending. We can get to the ending, but like, I don't even think Tom Boiled has come close to, in my experience, the high that I get from that last 1-2 punch of, or 1-2-3 punch of Selfish Gene, Acid Wash, Cosplay, including the Apocalypse Now outro. That, it's so goddamn good. I mean, I know it was already there, but you just sort of like plugged them into place. But just like putting them in that order with the studio quality and all that, and the mixing together of the studio version of Cosplay with the live version with the I can't remember what sample that was from. People kept saying The Lion Sleeps Tonight. I don't know where they got that from. It's from like some
They're
it's like from some
it
African
sounds vaguely
recording,
African, yeah.
right? I don't know what exactly it's from, but
Yeah, I think it's a Ladysmith Black Mambazo song, and I think it's a song. I think it's the song that they play at the in that Eddie Murphy movie Coming to America. But
that's right.
Yeah,
I remember that now.
I do kind of just want to take a second to maybe, for all the less deep heads out there, explain Tom Boiled, and also just sort of
Right.
maybe like what the tradition, this fan mix I made, it was kind of coming from. Maybe this would be a cool opportunity to just talk about this aspect of the band that we probably all find so special, which is like the way the fans interact with it, and the way it sort of seems to me like pretty organically a fandom arose around this band that and just kind of like with their hands off approach to their material, and like cultivating of like I don't know if they were actually ever like specifically involved with Collected Animals, but they were like a part of posting on there quite a bit in the early days. But yeah, there's the Reaper Madness kind of came from this tradition that had existed in two other instances and has since like gone on to other fans projects. There was, I think the first instance of this was on a Collected Animals forum. Somebody made a fan mix of Feels called Feeling Store, with the same idea in mind. I think one of the things like many fans of this band really get into is their live transitions. I think for people who, especially like if this is, if Animal Collective ends up being your intro to more out music, the idea of these like transitions is pretty mind blowing the first time you encounter them.
Right, because most bands, they play a song, they stop, they start another one, or they stop, they do banter, and then they start another one.
Exactly.
And it's like, sometimes you forget that you're watching a band perform on stage when you see them live, because they'll do like 5 songs in a row and then stop. And you're like, oh, right, these guys are human beings and not wizards with, you know, musical instruments. But
exactly.
You see that clip of that, I think it was like a synth festival or something, and Hannibal Buress was interviewing them.
Yeah, the Rogue Fest.
And he was like, you guys don't like people clapping for your song?
Was that the same one where they talk about when they went to Japan to perform, and they would like finish performing and then the crowd wouldn't clap, and they'd be like, are we that bad? Do we suck that much? And they were like, no. In Japan, it's part of the culture. They don't applaud until the entire performance is over. Which, respect to them, I guess. But
I dig that, the opera style. Wait till the final number, the final aria.
People love to clap after what they think is over.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever heard anyone do like a full album cover of Sgt. Pepper? I think Cheap Trick is the Eric Copeland song.
Right.
Cheap Trick did a Sgt. Pepper's cover album, and they get to the end of A Day in the Life, and before the final chord, everyone starts clapping, and then the final chord happens, and then you hear people go, shh. It's like, well, too fucking late.
It's also funny, like, as a sidebar, like, it's funny to me, the idea that, like, we live in, like, this, like, post-Beatles world where everybody's, like, so familiar with the Beatles, but then at the same time, like people don't expect, like, they're like, wait, there's a more? You know what I mean? Like, they're like,
oh, silence? I gotta fill the silence.
Yeah, like, how do you not know this A Day in a Life and its final chord? You know what I mean? But
thankfully, Panda Bear's music is too loud to where even with his in-ear monitors, he can't hear shit. That's like a running theme with the band where, like, people will yell stuff out to them, but unless it's, like, dead silent and they're not playing anything, they just straight up won't hear them, which I respect.
That's why me and Jordan have to turn up our headphone volume so loud. It's because we can't hear from too many Animal Collective shows now.
There you go.
Wow.
But yeah, so
apparently you guys are old, because if you've been fans of this band for 20 years, you know.
Why does this come up on every episode, Greg?
Because I'm almost 30 and I'm insecure. Obviously, that's why. You don't worry.
I don't mean to speak for Jordan, but I'm insecure about being in my mid 30s. So every age is worth being insecure about.
That was one of the first things Jordan said to me on our podcast was, "Yeah, I'm old," or maybe it was even on our Facebook messages. You said it at some point, and that's just for some reason it's stuck in my head. Even though you're only what, like 36, 37.
37. Yeah, only 37. That's right.
Only 37. I'm 37 years young.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, to finish providing the context for the fan mix thing. So Feeling Store was a fan mix that somebody had made where they had put the feels transitions from the live performances into the mix, so that it would flow as a record without seams, without pauses. It would just flow all the way through. And then another person, I wish I could remember the name of the users who made these, but another person made a mix called Tomboiled, which was Panda Bear's Tomboy, and they kind of did something next level. They like both included the transitions, but I think they also included like single mixes and also like live performances where the BPM would match the recorded performance, and started blending all of these things together to create this like very epic full Tomboy experience that has
Patrick Cederberg is the name of the guy who did Tom
Patrick
Boyle.
Cederberg. Patrick Cederberg.
It's a great name.
Because I remember when he joined the Facebook group, I was like, oh my God, it's the guy. It's the Tom Boyle guy.
Cederberg.
Mr. Cederberg, I presume.
He made the amazing choice of including the I Think I Can Chores live jam from that era on his mix. And that was sort of the acid wash cosplay moment of that, where it just sort of transcended the original material almost.
Yeah, it was just such a, like, I think that was, I hadn't heard Feeling Story yet. Tom Boyle was the one I had heard. And I was already like a huge fan of Tomboy anyway. And then hearing that, it just blew my mind that like you could interact with songs that way, that you could have like not a passive experience with an artist that you love, and in fact like engage your creative faculties with the work that they're doing. And it seems so in the ethos of like what the band had been doing up to that point.
It feels very satisfying to hear the clean studio versions come through with all of that mixing going on. Like you can hear it, like sometimes the transitions won't be the highest quality just based on whatever recording was available. But then when it snaps into the studio version, it's just like, and it all just feels like it's just like wrapped up in a little bow.
Totally. Yeah. And it gives you just this like snapshot picture of the entirety of the era. You get like, you kind of almost get this like mega crack mix of just like here's everything that was happening over the course of the years that this project was culminating, kind of like boiled down into this like fine, pure like experience. Anyway, so
we should also give a shout out to Axe World, who did This Is the New Centipede, which is the Centipede Hurts fan mix. And then he also did Painting Without, which I swear, I think he waited like 2.5-3 years from the start of the Painting With era to actually get it finished, just because he was waiting for the later tours to finish, to get those recordings, and then the Painter's EP and all that came out afterwards. So a lot of dedicated fans cutting stuff together. And I even did my own like minimalist quick version of like a Strawberry Jam mashup, just because I wanted to have Safer at the end. My favorite moment from that was going from the ending of Fireworks to the beginning of Water Curses, because they both kind of have like a little drone that bookend them. And so if you just sort of blend them together, it can go, as opposed to just dropping right into, number one, how abstract that gets.
Yeah.
So I think I still have that somewhere. Yeah, I think I just called it Strawberry Jammed because that's how lazy I was. I don't know if it's still on SoundCloud or anything, but I think I also did a my own Painting With mix, but it was also just the same thing, where I think the only thing I added was like a 2-minute intro from Hounds of Barrio. I always want to say Barrio, but I don't think that's how it's spelled. Anyway,
it's Barrio.
Yeah. We get sidetracked a lot on this, but
I love sidetracking. Barrio Kart, Barrio Party. That was where I was going to sidetrack us, but we can return to the main thread.
Beasts don't have a sec to think, right?
They don't.
We really don't. I probably need less sex to think.
But we don't appreciate our things. I think that's the lyric.
Beasts don't have a sec to think because
we don't appreciate our things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are those the only 2 lyrics to that hook?
To that hook? I think so.
Is it weird that that's like the most commercially successful song from this? I feel like Boys Latin got the most like...
It's just a loop for like
Spotify like shuffle airplay. Like people I know that didn't even listen to it just had on like an indie music station or whatever. And then Boys Latin would come up, and I swear half the time they'd be like, ugh, and try to hit skip. I'm like, no, I love Panda Bear. And they'd be like,
it's good.
Okay.
You don't even understand that this is just the beginning of the Hocket.
Yeah. But I can get it. I mean, if you're trying to just listen to like, Deer Hunter or whatever, and then BB don't have a butt. I can get it, but I always had this weird like Mandela thing where I thought that was the song that was in GTA 5, but it's not. It's Mr. Noah.
Oh.
That must have just been a PC edition though, because I mean the game came out in 2013 and that's a 2015 track. Or I guess 2014 if you want to count the EP.
They added it to the I think the PS4 version and upwards.
The second generation, right?
Yeah, the second generation release of it.
And now
that
we're
was
on
an
the
awesome
third.
surprise.
Yes.
I
can't wait for the 6th game. Anyway, I've been playing that all week and listening to Panda Bear, so that's been my last 7 days, basically.
All right, here's another sidetrack that will prevent us from getting to the track by track, but
it happens half the time anyway.
So I was listening to I was watching the video promos that they did for the Grim Reaper, and in a lot of the early promos they use just the acapella from Boys Latin, but they kind of chop it up in a different way. So it's like I'm not even sure exactly how it like exactly where they chop the lyric, but the effect is like it changes it so it sounds uncannily like Panda Bear's just going burrito, and it just sounds so much like he's saying burrito. And I had forgotten all about this. I remember at the time, like maybe on Collected Animals or something, like everybody was like, "What's this burrito song?"
That's awesome.
Maybe
Greg,
that was his reference to the Centipede Hurts Pitchfork review. The burrito on a windshield.
Yeah, there you go. Pounds of burrito.
There you go. We don't need to do track by track. It's fine. Let's just pick our favorites and talk about them.
My favorite's actually Davy Jones' Locker.
Well,
I didn't want to bring that up until...
We're going to have to actually kick you off the Zoom call. Do you guys have a favorite music video? We should talk about the music videos because I feel like this album is one of the few that has like the most.
I think I've probably said this before on this cast, but maybe I haven't. I'm constantly let down by Animal Collective music videos.
Yeah.
I just feel like I want more. And I will say that Mr. Noah is probably the closest I got to being like satisfied.
Yeah.
Not even Crosswords? Was Crosswords did it feel too forced for you?
Felt too forced.
That one kind of just like, it also feels like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like it feels so like, just like from that era, like the Tim and Eric-ification of everything, which is like kind of an aesthetic. I'm like, I love Tim and Eric, but like I kind of feel like at that time in media, it was just like, oh my God, like enough of this, like I don't know, like irony, post-irony, like green screen.
You're just
thing.
saying that because they had a nondescript actor dancing in front of a green screen. That's the only Tim and Eric comparison you can make.
Exactly.
Personally, I love the Crosswords video. I only have one note, which is I wish they had a more powerful computer to render it, because you can clearly see where it was struggling to blend all 35 layers that they put into the frame at times. But that one I feel like I go back to the most. Like, I don't think you're ever going to get a closer representation of their aesthetic and sound than like the Floridada video. Mm-hmm. Like if I showed someone that, I'd be like, yeah, that's Animal Collective, just so you know. And then you show them My Girls, but those two I feel like kind of sum it up. But we should at least talk about the Tropic of Cancer video, because not only is it, you know, heartbreaking, and it's got that metaphor of the family and the dogs, or the people in the giant dog suits, and, you know, there's an actual dog that comes along and starts mauling one, and, you know, it's supposed to be cancer attacking the dad, and it's a song about his dad dying in 2003, I want to say. It's directed, the music video, by a man named David Portner, and the director of photography is the actor Giovanni Ribisi. I'm not making that up. That's true.
Yeah,
you can look it up. There's like a behind the scenes photo of him and Dave on set talking about the shot.
He also did the one of the Slasher Flicks videos.
That's true.
Catchy Was Contagious.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That video is great too.
I just want to know, how the hell did they meet the villain from Ted and then start collaborating with him creatively? I don't know. How does that... Was it just like one of those things where Elijah Wood is really into Ween and just goes to every Ween show? So like Giovanni was just a huge Anco fan and was just like, man, I want to help out with anything I can.
That's something you'll have to investigate in your undisclosed project, Greg.
Yes, that's right. Get to the bottom.
That's true. In my dossier.
That's the main like theme of the project, I would say, at this point.
Well, you can't see it, but out of frame over there's actually a shrine to all 4 members in the corner of the room with the candles and the strands of hair and all that. So
yeah, you collect their chewed bubble gum, right? That's what you make their likeness out of their old bubble gum.
I tried, but then COVID came around and they stopped chewing gum. I don't know what to tell you.
They're half built.
Yeah, you're like, when is the scare going to be over? I've got a project to finish.
I just want to have as much memorabilia as I can. As much of their DNA.
You ever seen the movie The Other Sister with Giovanni Ribisi?
No.
Me neither. I have to admit, I'm not as much of a film head, so I don't even know who Giovanni Ribisi is.
Oh my!
Did you ever see Ted?
Is that the one with Mark Wahlberg?
Yeah, and the CGI teddy bear.
I did not see it.
No,
that's probably.
Have you ever seen Lost in Translation?
I have seen Lost in Translation.
I think he's not. Is he Scarlett Johansson's fiance, or is he like with the other actress in the movie?
I don't know. I don't even remember him being in that movie.
I don't even remember his character. But those are literally the only 2 movies I remember him in, other than like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan. Or how about Gone in 60 Seconds?
Oh, it's this guy. I just Googled him.
We should talk about the last 3 tracks on the album, because I feel like I was on a thing earlier where I was like, you can bunch like the first half of the album together, and then you have like Tropic of Cancer and Lonely Wanderer is like the ambient duo, taking out the transition, of course. And then you have the last 3, which that none of them really sound alike, but they all sort of fit together. Goodness gracious. I got banana burps going on, ladies and gentlemen.
Eating a lot of bananas?
Just one. But it was super ripe, so maybe that's what it was. It was very soft when I ate it.
A gaseous banana.
Yeah. The last 3 tracks, Principe Real, Selfish Gene, Acid Wash, they all have different vibes, but there's just something about them where like I wouldn't have put them in any other order. Also want to give a shout out to Frepno, who every time Acid Wash comes up has to point out that they hate it. I just want to humiliate you in front of our audience and point at you and say, you're wrong. It's a great song. Selfish Gene is great because I love recreating it on any synthesizer with an arpeggiator. You just pick your chord and go for it.
What do you think do you think there's a quality that binds those 3 tracks? Because I agree, there is something very like something after Lonely Wanderer happens, and there's just sort of like I guess I sort of picture it as like the sunset of the album, but I don't quite know what the quality, because the songs are all very different. But what do you guys think?
Principe Real gives me like the vibe of a city, like a downtown city at night, like people going out to the club. That's a Megalopolis reference. But I don't know. Maybe it's because Selfish Gene feels so stripped down in comparison, and Acid Wash also doesn't really have that much, like, you know, background noise. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that they do have like
I'm sure if you looked it up, like the keys of each one and the chord changes, maybe there is some sort of unifying mode or whatever. But
yeah, it's like there's kind of like an upbeatness, I think, to them as well, you know, coming out of like Tropic of Cancer and Lonely Wanderer. You know, it's like there's something definitely clubby about Principe Real, but like Selfish Gene is weird because it is almost like a clubby song that doesn't have any of the elements of a club song, you know, because it's so stripped down. And I think kind of all 3 of them kind of feel like the constant building, like you were kind of saying earlier, Greg, about waiting for that drop, you know. I feel like they all kind of like fit that kind of like ramping up to Acid Wash, and then like, you know, it's a great
Acid Wash at least has that sort of like you know, explosion of noise at the end.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that sort of almost traditional way of like an Animal Collective record ending like on a sort of bigger, you know, note than a more like downbeat note, with the exception of Time Skiffs. But
we were talking about Lonely Wanderer. I feel like we should point out that it has a sample from a Claude Debussy, and then Tropic of Cancer samples the Nutcracker Suite.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like
not the easiest thing to recreate from scratch. I don't know how he does it. He's a sample wizard.
Well, there's also like, I think the 2 are really interesting. I mean, there's like a theme in Panda Bear's music in general. There's 2 themes into Panda Bear's music in general that I really, really enjoy. And one of them, I think it's in those two, it's particularly there because they're classical samples. But it's always struck me that Panda has had like this slightly, well, but his sense of harmony seems to be very classical. And I know he's done choir singing, so he probably was like steeped in some of those, those like very classical choral pieces that have these
right,
like
and he
sort of
sampled
non-rock
like Gregorian chants or whatever on person pitch.
And he's also like such a I always think of him as the formalist in the band, whereas like AV is a little bit more of the impressionist. I think Panda seems to always bring like
I didn't pay that much attention in Humanities, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get to put it more bluntly, like I think Panda is just like into forms, you know what I mean? Like it seems like the rule set is where Panda like really begins in a lot
especially
of
when you get to stuff like buoys.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like Dave has always struck me as a little bit more about like I think he's probably like the bigger proponent of improvisation in their work. Just guessing from his style, he always seems to have like a much more like impressionist in the sense that he's like not afraid to be messy and not afraid to like be a little blurry and not really be, like he's like Panda colors within the lines, Dave colors outside of the lines is how I always think about it.
Which is kind of why that, to go with what you were saying, that's sort of what comes across on this album is it is kind of like a contradiction where it is messy, but it's also uniform at the same time.
Totally. It's like paint by numbers, but it's like the most like schizo maximalist paint by numbers you've ever received in your life. But yeah, those two songs, so like the sort of like direct classical reference there between the Nutcracker and the Debussy sample are like just feel like to me like really big nods to that sort of like harmonic and like formal sensibility that Panda's always had. And then the other thing that I find really interesting about those two songs, there's in the melody of Tropic of Cancer, there's even like the beginning of it is like kind of a straightforward interpolation of I believe I don't remember the Nutcracker Suite that well, but I think it's like a cello melody or something that comes in after the harps that like it's like really the melody in the Nutcracker really is like and then it kind of does its own thing, but it's I mean like for the very beginning of the melody it's like Panda's like taking that melody and it's almost like he's just going to run with it, and then he just finds that right moment to kind of split apart and like take it to Panda Land. And it in that way it kind of reminds me of this like another song where to meet my ears he does that, which is that song off of Bowie's Dolphin, because that's not a sample, but it's the opening chord and kind of inspired by that I totally don't remember the record, but it's an Ethiopiques record. That song starts off with the same guitar strum, and he sings the melody that the sax line plays in that song that he's referencing.
Yeah. I think I do know what you're talking about. I think I did see that when someone discovered it back then.
Yeah. I think the name of the song is Tizeta, but I'm not quite sure. But it's like it's really cool because it's like this sort of, I mean, it's like always strikes me as really interesting, like how careful Panda seems to be about like sticking to the rules to the point where you're almost like he's going to just like not break anything, like he's not going to break out at all, and then he just kind of picks this like right moment to like split apart, and all of a sudden it's like its own journey and becomes psychedelic nonetheless, despite the fact that he's been so kind of strict in creating the form and the idea that he's like working within.
Did y'all know the sample in Crosswords ahead of time? Like, was that something you were aware of before he used it? The Ashley's Roach Clip drum beat, break beat.
Oh, I didn't realize. No, I didn't know that's what it was from. I just assumed it was from a sample pack.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's very similar in its utility to like the Amen break that I think, it does get lumped in. But it is from like another 70s soul. It's like an instrumental basically, like Amen Brother. But it is just like, 3.5 minutes into the song, just and it's just like perfect for splitting. And I feel like I've tried to use the sample before to like write my own song, but every time it just ends up becoming Crosswords. Like I just want to hear that. So what can you do? One time, a friend of mine, shout out to Keeks, I went to go visit them in Detroit
and we did like an hour-long Facebook stream where we just jammed various Panda and Co. AV songs, whatever we could play with a ukulele and a little, stick and jar. And when we got to crosswords, we sang like the two parts of the harmony. And then at some point they uploaded that stream to YouTube, and the copyright bot actually claimed it because that's how close our voices were to the original recording.
Nice
that
work.
was before there was like the melody detection. So I just want to flex a little bit.
That's a good flex.
If I wanted to do a panda impression, I probably could. That's my Halloween costume, by the way.
Yeah.
Panda with a beard.
Nice.
Panda beard is going to be my costume.
Panda beard.
I feel like this is like foreshadowing to 10 years when we all start our like Grateful Dead style Animal Collective cover band and like start touring around.
Well, Jordan and I would have already done that if it wasn't, the distance between Texas and Toronto wasn't in the way. So,
yeah.
What are you going to do?
Hey, I also want to mention, Greg, that I don't think I've told you this before, but I saw that live feed of you playing that stuff before I even like knew you, really. I don't know how I saw it. I must have been just a member on...
I think you probably were. And I think you were just around in the group posting. And then, every time there'd be a B-side or like a rarity that wasn't uploaded anywhere, it would just be on your YouTube channel within a week. And then the name Jordan Randall always just stuck. And then it kept building up until I was like, hey, you should be an admin of this Facebook group. And then, hey, we should start a podcast out of spite. But here we are. Actually, I think we started Lunar Panel before we started the podcast.
Lunar Panel first, yeah.
But we also have a track record of putting out like one song a year with that. So actually, that's not true. We put out two songs this year.
This year, yeah.
Nice.
But we also didn't put out any for like 2 years in between. So I think the math does still work out.
Eventually, we will. I swear, by the end of this decade, we will put out an album. Just like
you
GTA
heard
6.
it here first. You heard it here first. It's
We've
going to
probably
be the
said
sound.
before.
It's going to be the
A lot of pressure,
soundtrack for GTA 6, right? That's what you're waiting for.
Weatherman, definitely.
Yeah.
I guess we should go to the EP tracks. Do y'all have any favorites from that bunch?
Oh, definitely.
For sure. Lots of good stuff there.
I'm like really. There's a couple. I think for me it's like between Papa Dom and I forget the title, if it's just Paradise or if there's more to it. Maybe it's like Paradise
This
Lost.
Side of Paradise?
This Side of Paradise, that's right.
Which one is Papa Dom? Like, what is the final title of that?
The Papa Dom is the final title, but it's the one in, I think it is anyway.
No, that's the demo name.
Is it the demo name? It's the one
I think it's Jabberwocky, isn't it?
No, this is the one that in the ATP
No
show.
Man's Land?
Maybe it's No Man's Land. That's it. That's it. Because it's the one with the 50-50 and the what's up sample. Which I was just like, when I first heard the ATP performance, like that one and the Lisbon Zoo into Jabberwocky were like just like mind blowing for me as a fan. I was like, what?
Well, that's why I was happy
is
to actually hear that mix, because the second that Scream sample starts out, I'm like, oh my God, I know this one. I've heard this before. And it took me like a minute. I was like, that's the freak out scene in 50-50. He's about to go get surgery for his cancer and he's having a mental breakdown. I'm like, that's awesome that Panda's a fan of that movie too. It's the best Seth Rogen movie to date, unless you count the Danny Boyle, Steve Jobs movie. But
And Seth Rogen's also an Animal Collective fan, apparently.
that's true.
Is that real?
Cut to the photo of him in that Apple TV show or whatever. It's him wearing that 2019 tour shirt, the white one with all the like flowers and the
That's
black
not
font and all
2019
that.
tour. That's like 2022.
No, it isn't. It was 2019.
like-
I bought it when I saw them at Tulsa, I think. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're wrong because I bought that shirt as well after they were touring Time Skiffs.
Well, they still had leftovers. They were gonna
maybe
they were gonna sell more of them, but then coronavirus hit.
Wait, Jordan, this is another sidetrack, but you're in Toronto, and I can't remember. I just remember reading at one point that Seth Rogen does the voices on in the public transit in some city in Canada. That's not Toronto, is it?
No, that's in Vancouver.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I wish. voices here. They're all just robo voices.
Yeah, it's just
do
like
you wish it was Seth Rogen, Jordan?
I
do you want to hear that
honestly,
on your way to work?
Taking public transit in Toronto is a nightmare. So like anything to kind of add a little bit of levity to the situation would be nice, because honestly, it's you gotta it's like pure adrenaline. Every time you hop on a streetcar or on a train.
Yeah.
Hey, the next stop is Hamilton Avenue.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I'd make the commute kind of fun.
Make sure you save your weed until you're off the train.
Going back to the EPs, I mean, Papa Dom and Lisbon Zoo and Jabberwocky were, for me, like, and knowing the ATP rehearsals, that was like,
oh yeah,
a major motivation for me for making the Reaper Madness mix, was just because I was like,
that was like also part of what got me hype about it when that came out. Was like, not only did that live thing exist, but then someone had finally been able to stitch them together with the studio versions and recreate that. Like, I mean, the fact that they aren't in that form on the finished album is probably, I think, my biggest demo-itis moment. But what are you gonna do? You wanted to release them, at least Boys Latin, as a single, and you can't really do that with the form it was in. So I get it, but...
So here's my question for you guys is, did you... I mean, Greg, you kind of encountered it as it was coming out, but like, what did you think Lisbon Zoo and Jabberwocky were separate songs originally, or did you frame them as separate songs originally?
Well, because I didn't hear any of the like live stuff until it's kind of a blur, but I feel like I had known they were different just because they were in separate parts on Reaper Madness. So,
right.
And it wasn't until like I was deep into I was getting to everything by the time the Crosswords EP vinyl came out. And so I bought that, and then it was on the download card. So I knew they were different, but
so
I can see why, like, from the original demo names, that people would get them confused.
Yeah. Jordan, did you think they were separate songs?
Yeah, so I actually had a kind of similar experience to Greg, because, I'd been a fan of Animal Collective since around 2004, 2005 as well, but somehow, I don't even know how this happened, but there was like a weird like pause for my super fandom, like in the 2010 to 2015, I guess, period. So I wasn't like, listening to live bootlegs and stuff like that. As far as I know, I don't think I was even familiar with much of the rollout for Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper. I think I knew like that it was coming out, but I didn't see like the video clips or anything. And then, it leaked online. I think that was like, I feel like that was around Christmas time or something. And then that I just, I listened to it for the first time, like, at the studio versions. So then later when the Crosswords EP came out, like I bought it. And then months later, I still wasn't like on the forums or anything. I was just like, I want to listen to this on my way to work or something. So I put in the download card, code. And I was like, fuck, there's an extra song on here. Cool. And I listened to it and I was like, this song slaps. I was like, why didn't they put this on this?
So
where would you put it?
Just track 6 on Crosswords.
Yeah. I mean,
no, you can't do it after cosplay. Cosplay is the ultimate.
Cosplay does have to end.
But I don't know where I did hear like the live version of Cosplay at some point throughout that period, and I remember like falling in love with that, as a stoner, and a Panda Bear Animal Collective fan, and so I was like super stoked to hear it, and I did get the demo-itis thing when I did finally hear it on Crosswords. I was like, no,
like, where's the voices?
Yeah.
So the reason I ask, I got super involved in the rollout of this one. Like this probably like was the peak of my fandom, in terms of like my engagement with this band and its surrounding world in like a very active way. And when the first ATP recordings came out, I think everybody was convinced Lisbon Zoo and Jabberwocky were one song. Like that was like a source of a lot of controversy.
I can see that from the way that the drum pattern blends together. It's basically the same beat.
It's the same beat, and there's even like I haven't gone as far as like analyzing it harmonically or anything, but there's like to my ears, like such a clear catharsis to whatever the tension in Lisbon Zoo is that is relieved on Jabberwocky. And Jabberwocky, I mean, it's kind of cool what he ended up doing with it, like this single melody song, but it's like it is just one melody. Like like that song is like
yeah,
4 or 5 minutes of this
it's a
one
great
melody.
palette, but it does feel like it wasn't a fully realized song, and they wanted to have a full EP length for the second one.
Right.
So I can see that.
Right. And yeah, this has always been like one of the interesting, like the ways we can all conceive of things differently. Like it just seems so obvious, I think, I wouldn't say, I don't want to speak for everybody who was engaging with this. I'm sure there's plenty of people who were like, oh yeah, that was totally two different songs. But like, it seems so obvious on the forums at that point that like everybody was like, this one song is going to be like mind blowing. And then when everything was finally released and it was realized that they were actually two separate songs, or rather that like Panda was like conceiving of them as two separate songs. I remember that being like, probably like for me, like the only real head scratcher of the whole experience of being like, how could you view these as two different songs? But of course, like that's me with my particular brand of demoitis. And it's just funny, like how much the perception of those two songs for me, like I still to this day, I can't hear them as separate songs. I can't get my brain to hear it that way. It just sounds like, oh, Lisbon Zoo, he forgot to do the last part, and Jabberwocky, oh, he forgot to do the first part. You know what I mean?
It does. I can't remember if it comes at the end or the beginning or like during the transition, but like it does seem like there's a bit of pitch shifting going on with the Jabberwocky chord. So there maybe is some sort of transposition going on there.
Right. Yeah.
Did you guys ever hear the? This is kind of switching topics a little bit. Did you ever hear the anecdote when Panda did an interview how he was talking about the track Mr. Noah? He wanted to write it because he thought it would be a song that his daughter would like, because she was like a big fan of Rihanna and like
right.
Umbrella, and so that's sort of like bit on the leg. That was his sort of. He said that was his Rihanna moment, and then they were like, "So did she like it?" He's like, "No, she doesn't like anything that I do."
Yeah.
Just like, damn.
I know. Yeah, I remember reading that one too. I also just love that that's like his idea of like, he's like, oh yeah, that's my pop hook, and it's like
that's my this. Yeah, even Crosswords is more of a traditional pop song.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like Mr. Noah it's a fucking weird melody. It's like,
well, that you've got whining dogs in the back, whining, squealing dogs. It's not easy on the ears.
Yeah. He's like, this
unless
is my
you're a
pop
Panda
song.
Bear. That's why it scared me the first time I heard it. I was like, ah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know these guys get weird, but Jesus, I'll come back to this, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
As far as the EP B-sides, whatever you want to refer to them as, I think my favorite from Mr. Noah is Untying the Knot.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that was... I think that was already a thing, but then like when he sort of teased it during the Buoys tour, that sort of reignited it. I was like, well, we didn't get to hear it, but now I get to go home and listen to it again.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that one was one that really... I mean, I think all of them benefited in certain ways from the studio treatment, but I remember that one being like, oh, I get this song now once I heard the studio version, because it has that like cool, it starts off with that, I think it's like a koto sample or something, and it's all of a sudden just
yeah, some old Chinese string instrument.
Exactly. I remember being like, this is probably like just my ignorant ass like making stupid associations, but I remember being like, oh, this reminds me of Dynasty Warriors. Have you ever played that game? But I was just like, oh, that's sick. This is a cool zone. And then all of a sudden the beat comes in, and then like turning the melody into a round as opposed to like a single melody. It's like, oh, this makes so much sense.
Yeah. I've unless you like, cause when he does Boys Latin live, he has the higher register that he's doing himself hocketing just on playback. But I would imagine that trying to do that with Untying the Knot would be much more complicated, which is probably why he just stuck to the instrumental during the Buoys tour.
Right. Right.
Also, can we talk about the Preakness?
Oh, hell yeah.
Because when I first heard that, I had not heard the 2011 version, the Tomboy Reject, unless you have the deluxe vinyl, in which case it's smack dab in the middle. So for a while, all I knew was the four to the floor, bum, 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 that version. And so when I heard the 3-time, just guitar, barely any drums version, it was just like, what? You could do that?
Yeah.
But wasn't it like the story that Sonic Boom was, because he also produced Tomboy, right? Or he just, I don't know, did he only master and mix it, or was he like, he wasn't as hands-on, I don't think, with the like creative process, but it must have just been a thing where he liked that song too much and was like, you got to include it on this, but it doesn't really match the sound of this, so they just sort of revamped it. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, I think you're right that the Tomboy stuff, as I understand it, Sonic Boom came in after the fact, and like kind of like as I understand the narrative, Panda was like not super stoked about like his own mixes, so he brought Sonic Boom to kind of like add special Sonic Boom sauce to all of it.
Which again adds to the like weird hostility that some fans have against Sonic Boom for his involvement. They're like, the single mixes were so much better, and you listen to them back to back, and if you don't have the demo-itis from like that rollout period, you listen to it, you're like, they sound exactly the same. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure there are very subtle differences, like a kick drum having a delay or an echo slapback as opposed to not. Or like on Surfer's Hymn,
Well, there's
like
some
vocal
that are
going
more
all the
subtle.
way up and then all the way down in the background with the pitch shift.
On Tomboy, the track itself, like he added that's I think it's a synth.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
Are you
in the
talking
original
about?
mix.
Yeah.
No,
No.
Well, there's that kind of like drony synth that comes in right at the beginning. That wasn't in the first one. I remember like having a bit of a demo-itis thing, and then hearing that Sonic Boom had come in to like make some tweaks to the mixes, and I was like, see how different it is. And I was like, what is that? They just slapped this thing on top that doesn't need to be there. But I've grown to love it since, and listening back.
I don't
to
have
the original
that.
single one.
I'd have
I'm
to
like,
hear the
sounds
original
weird without
mix.
Yeah. No,
That's
totally.
just how it's always been to me.
I had a similar feeling with that one, Jordan. There's a couple from the Tomboys where I remember. I mean, it's interesting. I suppose it just betrays how much we, as humanity, hate change. You know what I mean? And we're like,
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Oh god, the fucking time skips era was brutal.
yeah,
Especially waiting
exactly.
5 years to see what the differences would be, or not even 5. It's been 5 since those shows. But
Yeah, but totally. Yeah, it's just like amazing how much our minds just want to put things into cement as much as possible. I had a similar thing with that one, and I think it's probably like Slow Motion where like and Surfer's Hymn, because like in the original Surfer's Hymn there's like pretty prominent kick throughout, if I remember correctly, and then there's
I
like
think so.
and then like in the final mix they like play a lot more with pulling it out and pulling
right,
it back
like
in.
I think the single one, it just like starts with the kick,
Yeah.
and the album one, it waits till the chorus picks up for any percussion, which I like.
Totally.
These are
It's
good
like
changes.
after sitting with it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like much more compositionally savvy. But I remember initially being like, what the fuck? They changed this perfect song. Get your meddling hands out of this, Sonic.
I was talking about that pitch, like up and down effect, which is very prominent on the single version, and you can still kind of hear it in the studio one. It's just very low in the mix.
Right.
Which I don't know if that was a Panda Bear decision, a Sonic Boom decision, or a Domino Records decision.
Right.
But I think wasn't he also putting out those singles on like not Domino? Like that was like a thing where like he was just picking, like each single had a different label, and then the album proper was Domino.
The Surfer's Hymn single came out on Compact, which is like particularly funny because the cover art said techno on it, and that's like what Compact is known for. But it's also funny because it's like, dude, Panda, this isn't techno.
Well, it's like how what is it? Smuggler's Way, the Braxton Falcon label that Step by Step was put out on. It has that big S on the logo because it's Smuggler's Way, not Step by Step. So when other releases were coming out afterwards with that logo, people were like, why are they reusing it? I'm like, that's just a French label thing. I don't think that's just, they're paying homage to the 90s with that. Although speaking of different mixes, what's the deal with the Crosswords EP mix? Is there literally any difference between the two?
There's a slight one. The vocoder isn't in the EP mix. I think it's Sonic Boom saying like, I remember he posted on the forums what he was saying in the background, but in my mind I'm just turning it into Eat, Pray, Love for some reason. But that voice that's like, It's on the album mix, but it's like completely absent on the EP mix.
That's bizarre. Why wouldn't you fix it wouldn't it be the opposite way around where the Domino would be like, take out that weird voice, and then on the EP you'd be like, I'm going to do whatever I want?
Totally. Yeah.
It's weird.
Another weird decision. Yeah,
even like Mr. Noah was just the same song with no, denomination.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have a bit of a curveball to throw in here, but it's sort of I want to throw this idea at you guys, particularly because we've been saying Sonic Boom's name so much. There's a quality to all of these songs, and I wonder if you agree that this is like the most Sonic the Hedgehog that Panda Bear's ever sounded. Does that resonate with you guys? Does this sound like Sonic music to you?
Jordan?
I would say, yeah. I mean, like, it's been a while since I've played, I assume you're talking about the original Sonic games.
Yeah, like Green Hill Zone, that kind of vibe.
Right.
Which
yeah,
they
I mean, I could
on
see
the
that.
Crestone soundtrack.
Oh,
Hey.
they did?
They
Oh,
did.
shit, look at that.
Whoa.
I think the track is called Wake Up Ryan. And they randomly just like sort of fade in the melody, and it just like kind of oscillates throughout it as like part of a dream sequence in the movie. And then later in the movie itself, not on the soundtrack, there's an entire there's a music video where one of the guys, because they're all rappers, and one of them has a song called Chaos Emeralds, and it samples that like Green Hill Zone, or like that first level track that everyone knows.
Yeah.
It goes hard.
Yeah, to me, I feel like this is like, honestly, like, and I'm sort of just playing like magical association, but I honestly think of Sonic Boom as bringing the Sonic the Hedgehog element to these songs. There's like, just talking about the overarching aesthetic of Grim Reaper, particularly, the phrase that came to my mind when I was listening back to that was like, plastic organic. Like, it's so plastic, it's so fake sounding, but everything is also kind of like oscillating and like falling out of time and in time, and it just seems to me like that's somehow like just like through mystic association, Sonic Boom has the Sonic the Hedgehog palette in him, and he brought it to this record to me.
I don't know, I think he just likes psychedelics, but maybe that's just me. Speaking of colors and aesthetics and all that, how do you guys feel about the actual album art? Because we were talking earlier about the PBVSGR acronym, which does come from the Mixtapes album art, but it's also on the actual Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper album art. So yeah, I know that confuses some people, but I think the main point of contention is the color palette. Some people think it's ugly or hard to look at. Maybe it is hard to look at, but I think it perfectly visually represents the like blending of sound palettes and the different colors, if you will, that the album plays with in its design.
Mm-hmm. It's also like very Sonic Boom, like I feel like Sonic Boom, like a lot of the albums that he was working on at that time period, and even to this day have like this same, like, his All Things Being Equal album has a very similar color palette to the cover. There was that MGMT album that he worked on, also similar color palette.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I remember that album being pretty bad.
Which kind of does look like Tails from Sonic Surfboard.
Yeah, that's true.
See, the connections there.
Yeah, and then you got Reset with your block letters and neon colors and all that.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when it first came out, and like the EPs also came out, and like the remix. I guess EP that was digital. I remember thinking I was like, oh, this is sweet, because like if you combine all of them, they'll make the main Panda Bear Meets the Grim Reaper cover, but I guess that's not the case.
Yeah. And it's weird because the Crosswords logo is, I don't know if the Mr. Noah one has it too, but it's not even, I don't even think it really resembles the title. It's like, you can tell that the top is PB, but then you get to the bottom and it's like
like
is
GV
that a G
almost, yeah.
W 2V GE double V? What even is that?
Yeah.
Again, psychedelics. Who knows?
Yeah.
I like the part in the production, story of this album where it's like, and Sonic Boom mixed it. Where was it? It was like it wasn't Malta. It was another island. The Balearic island of Minorca.
So I just like to imagine him in this like sweaty little recording studio on this like, castaway sized island. And it's just like him in a dark room, maybe with some LEDs. He's got like a pina colada in one hand, and there's just like some ethnically ambiguous woman sitting in the background just quietly. And I guess I maybe in my head when he's done mixing they have sex or whatever. But I'm trying to imagine the like
it's like
the headspace you have to get yourself into to add all this weird shit to a pop album.
Yeah, I like that this vision you have of him is like sort of James Bond villain.
He's like James McAfee. John McAfee.
Right.
Rest in peace.
Totally. Yeah. It's the only way you can mix the Grim Reaper is make an antivirus program and then go off on an island and
well, that's what you did, right? For Reaper Madness, you did like a similar thing.
Yeah.
You got an Airbnb and your Russian male bride and your vodka.
Year-long retreat, yeah.
I'm actually curious, how long did it take you to do that mix? Like, from having the idea to uploading it to SoundCloud?
Yeah, it probably took me about like a month. It was like something I was doing. I'm trying to remember the circumstances exactly, because I was doing like a lot of other musical projects at that point. So I was just like doing a lot of things on my computer anyway, just like making mixes. I was like beginning to work on this record that I put out with my friend Alice called Hyperion Drive. That was like super in the like, like sampler and like DJ headspace. And so I think I was just kind of like messing with the Grim Reaper tracks to kind of like get myself into this like DJ headspace and just like play around with transitions and kind of, I was really like getting to know Ableton at that point. That was like, I think what that project was for me.
Man, more power to you. I literally cannot figure out Ableton. Like I've made stuff with it before, but then like I go back to Reaper and come back to Ableton just for like one thing, and I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah,
it's like me it's like if you gave me a speech to read in Farsi and said, "Don't make any mistakes," I'd be like, I'm not even gonna. No,
it's definitely like it's definitely got its own flow logic. It's completely different than any other DAW I've ever used. And it's cool because of that, because it really is like once you kind of get the hang of it, it's like, I wouldn't say it's like the best DJ software out there, but it like really makes you think about recording in terms of DJs. It's more like Lego block than anything I've ever used. But yeah, I was like, so I was like doing music projects. I was working at a coffee roastery for a while, and it was just sort of like the thing I would do to kind of like wind down at the end of the day, and just like kind of like try to mash a few of the songs together. I don't know if I even like had the intention of doing every single song at first. It was like really, like the idea was pretty iterative. Like I think I started with like making Lisbon Zoo and Jabberwocky one song. Like that was like my first goal, and then I was like, hey, that actually that felt pretty seamless. Like this came out in a way where like I could listen to this and not be aware of the fact that it was edited from like two different things. And so I just got more and more curious about what else I could do, and like playing with all the like sort of DJ effects that Ableton had, all the chopping and all the random like reverbs and flanges and pitch shifting. Ableton's like really good with pitch shifting. Oops, I keep hitting.
Well, I can't remember what your description. I think on the original SoundCloud upload, you were just like, thanks to Noah for making all this era so juicy or something like that and fun to play with.
Yeah,
I was just like, I can only imagine. Because especially, I like the most direct Tom Boyle homage in the mix, which is during Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker. Literally just for like 5 seconds, you like when he does the song live and it goes back from like his chorus or verse or whatever into an instrumental for a little bit. He just does like a yell.
Yeah.
And that's not on the studio version. You were just like, that's too good to not include in this mix. And it perfectly lines up and doesn't overlap with anything.
Yeah, I mean, there was just so much. I mean, I think one of the things that's like hard to really encapsulate talking about this after the fact is just how huge the world they created for this was. There was like, I mean, there's like the Mixtix mix. There was like, like pages and pages and pages of sonic boom riddles. There were.
Did they also do that that thing with like his official website where you go on it and there's like stems auto playing that
exactly. Like
grab.
people were like I forget what the term is, but like going into the back code and finding all these hidden files, and some of them seemed very purposeful. I seem to remember there being like some like you found me picture like hidden in the source code or something. And there's just like all these like soundboard boots. There was the mix that he made with his ex-wife that included like a couple early versions of these songs. There is we haven't even talked about this yet, but there's the whole Swallow at the Hollow mix, which is also
Right.
features a lot of like sounds that he would use in the transitions in the live zone. So it was just like, and since all the songs were all, like set BPM, and he was basically doing this was like the first era where Panda was really doing like DJ singer Panda mode, which is kind of the mode he's been in since, where he
Well, I
had
would
the
say
Aka track.
person pitch, but yeah.
Right. But even person pitch, it's like he's not really on a grid, you know what I mean? Like he's like it's kind of before he figured like I think he figured out like beat syncing. So like a lot of the
Yeah.
person pitch is like I'm just going to crossfade between these two samples that work well enough together. But
Well,
then
it's like also from I think what you're saying like with Grim Reaper. There, if you went to like one of the concerts and got the paper set list for the night, you would see like the tempo on like half of the tracks and be like, okay, here's the arrow, so you need to slow it down or speed it up.
totally. And like most of the tracks are when he plays them live are like precisely the same tempo as on the record. So it was just so easy to kind of like grab pieces and just blend them together because like you didn't have to do any beat matching at all. You just had to like drag it into the right spot and suddenly it's perfectly in sync. So like, yeah, it becomes, and especially I remember that like doing the Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker, there's so many like really good moments from the live shows where he like plays the main loop for like like upwards of 4 minutes, where you can like really just like cut out these like certain sections and like amplify certain sections and like cut out his voice in a certain moment and put it in. Like it was just so, it seemed so designed to be played with that way to me, and it was like so fun getting to discover, like thinking in terms of just like beat matching and like DJ mixing and like, and yeah, just like thinking about these transitions that were already like kind of prepared for me from just like all the good live recordings that there were, including like the ATP rehearsals. It was like so easy to just like plug those into
Do you remember if
the
you
original
used any of
songs.
the Pitchfork performance for the 2015 Pitchfork Fest?
Probably.
Because I know that there's like one transition from that I don't think is in your mix, but I'll never forget. And it's just like the lead up to Crosswords, basically. Like, I think he's just doing like the that sort of loop as he's coming out of something else. And then it goes on for like 2 minutes, and then he finally like hits the drum button, but it has like this sort of like rising cymbal sound. And then basically like the bass drops kind of like in that live version of Bros he did like 20 years ago, where it had like the house drums, and you hear the whole crowd go, "Hey!" And I'm like, see, that's my reaction to anytime he performs.
Yeah, totally. See, this is also one of the things that's like, I find myself sort of frustrated sometimes because I'll revisit this era and I'll have like this like very strong desire to be like, oh shit, that transition was cool. I totally didn't even grab that one. And like there every now and again I'm like, I kind of want to remake this whole fucking mix. So it's like, it's just but there's just too much to honor from this era. This whole era was just so unbelievably huge in
Well,
terms
that's how
of
I
just
feel about the documentary I made. You go back and watch it, and you're just and you go back through the clips that you scrolled past, and you're like, oh, damn it, that's perfect. But the movie's been out for a year. I can't fix it. I can fix it on my end, but no one will see it.
Totally. It kind of, this is like a offshoot, and obviously these days Kanye is a pretty controversial figure, but it reminds me a little bit of like when he put out Life of Pablo. There was like months afterwards where it was already up on streaming, but he just kept fucking with the mixes afterwards. And I was kind of like,
he was doing it during that listening party at Madison Square Garden, like actively opening up the DAW and fixing stuff.
Which is
at least
like,
to my memory.
Yeah, like I kind of think there's a part of me that's like, I mean, there's this could be like pretty tragic for some documentation reasons, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, that's like that was such a sick way of engaging with music. Like, what if you went on to Spotify and every time you went on, it was like the artist had changed the mix again? You know what I mean? Like, just like let them be living documents. Every time you have an impulse to be like, oh, I wish I'd done that better, you just go on and you're like, okay, now I like it better.
It's just the George Lucas effect, except
Exactly.
ideally you make decisions that the audience will approve of and not,
Yeah, it's probably
crucify you
true.
over.
It's probably true that like most people, if they had the ability to do that, would make their things objectively worse. It seems like there's a real grace to letting go of the thing when it's time to let go and
I
not
think
being
there's a
allowed
Trey
to touch it
Parker quote
anymore.
from that South Park documentary where he's like, part of the 6-day to air like timeline that they have for producing a single episode is just because you have to get it done after a certain point. You just have to let it go, because if you keep saying no, it's not finished, I need more time, and you spend 4 weeks on it, one episode, he's like, and it might have been maybe 5% better. So after
Yeah.
a certain point, you just have to accept it and move on, which I feel like is kind of how I am when it comes to putting up songs from Jordan and I's band. Part of the reason that it takes so long for it to come out is A, I'm lazy, but B, like there is just so many like details and nuances in the mix that I feel like as an editor or producer, if I don't fix it right there and then, it's going to bug me forever.
Yeah.
But, you also spend 2 years making a documentary. After a certain point, you're like, it's done. I don't want to touch it anymore.
Yeah. It's funny. They even talk about this. I really did my homework, y'all. I was watching the Greeting the Reaper mini doc that they made for this record. And they talk about this exact thing in making the Grim Reaper. They're talking about like, that point where you like start losing your sort of like, I don't know, your like scientific approach to these things. I think a Panda Bear is like talking about how like there were moments with these songs he's like losing his objectivity, and it's like kind of getting really hard to like actually see the forest for the trees, as it were. And
that's me with every episode of this podcast.
Totally.
Every time we wrap an episode, I'm like, that was the worst episode ever. if there wasn't a guest, I'm just like, I was awful on that. And then I sit down and edit it, I'm like, that's not that bad.
Yeah, totally. It's always better than we remember. But yeah, even with like the Grim Reaper, like Panda Bear, it says at one point he's like, yeah, I thought this whole process was going to take like 6 weeks, like 2 weeks in the studio, 2 weeks off, and then 2 weeks to mix it, and we'd be like done, it's out. And then it ended up like taking like over like 2 years in total, I think, from start to finish.
Because that first ATP show was like 2013.
Right.
And then it was well, to be fair, it was like the first week of January when the album came out. So it wasn't of 2015. So it wasn't super long, but yeah, definitely
not by,
I think
like,
the longest from like conception to release for one of their solo efforts.
Yeah, definitely. Though I guess Sinister Grift, if that first tweet was any indicator, might have had a much longer gestation period.
It was a very smart decision to put an X in the last digit of the year.
Very wise.
I mean, what he tweeted that in 2021 or even 2020, I think.
It might have even been 2020. It was like a long ass time ago.
Yeah, and then he did the September 21 Madrid set, because I think that was like right after they did Pitchfork in Chicago. Right. Which I guess we'll see how that turns out, because I have no idea if he's going to keep those sliding pitch guitars or what in the hell the final album is going to sound like. Even the snippets that I think we've heard from their social media, I don't think even will resemble. I think that's, as mentioned previously by A.V. Terra on this very podcast, probably has nothing to do with Sinister Grift, but we'll see.
Right.
Anything can
I'm
change
very
over
curious.
time.
I'm very curious. That's like one of the things that I think Panda Bear, like what I like so much about him is that he's like all of his presence on these, the way he talks about these things and the way he puts these things out. He seems to be just like masterful at mystery. It doesn't even seem like something I think he thinks that much about, but somehow like just the way he premieres things, the way he like talks about things, the way he uses his social media, it's just like you literally, I have no idea if those clips are related to anything, but somehow it like sort of fits into this like part of my brain as like a super fan who has a tendency to hyperfixate. It's just like, oh my God, is this going to be the sound, or is this like some just random one-off? You know, like I just started immediately getting conspiratorial about it.
Well,
Definitely
even
like
that, even
world building, I'd say, you know. It's like
Yeah.
even if it's not gonna end up on the thing, or like, you know, Greg and I were messaging each other like yesterday or 2 days ago when on Instagram there's like that video clip of people like in a lake or a lagoon or something like blowing into bottles.
Right.
And
right,
Dude,
Greg's like,
yeah.
that's
please tell me this is a sample on Sinister Grift. And it's
yeah.
like it might be, it might not be, but it still feels like it's in that
It's in the.
world, you know.
I'll have to send you that dude. That clip is of. I forget his name, but he's like one of the most badass Brazilian composers ever. He's like one of my heroes. That dude is like just an amazing performer. That full clip of them performing in the lagoon is like, I mean, it's like the most like Animal Collective shit you could ever think of. It's like five dudes in a lagoon like blowing on bottles, and then they do this like weird like yodel hawk it with each other. It's so sick.
I'm about to check that out.
Yeah.
Because that definitely reminds me of like their Amazon rainforest EP, the Meeting of the Waters, and all that.
Totally.
So, Reaper Madness was 9 years ago. We're at 2024 now. What have you been up to musically since then?
Yeah. So musically, so like I was mentioning before, I did two records with this label called Whatever's Clever, which was kind of like this like short run collectivist record label from a bunch of artists in New York City, which I'm based out of. One record is this record called Hyperion Drive, which is a project I did with my friend Alice, who also releases music as Alice TM. And that was like a we called it like a electronic psychedelic soap opera, but that was like kind of just like both of us, like, well, me and Alice have been performing in different bands for forever. We used to play in this band called Anawan. We were in this project called the Essential Prayers Project together. We went to college together, so this was like the first time we had ever done anything together, like just the two of us. So that record was record came out. Then I did a solo record called Burnout a couple of years ago, which I recorded outside at my friend April's house, and it was sort of like a investigation in, like, I really wanted to make a field recording album that lies to you. So like the record is presented like it's a field recording. So like I have like a couple like outdoor microphones picking me up on this like platform that's outside of my friend April's house. And then like after the fact, I just like started adding in all these like subtle overdubs, where the idea was basically like I wanted to give the impression that somehow like out in this field with me by myself with a guitar, like a full band and marching band would like suddenly emerge and just start accompanying the music. So that was the last one. And now the most recent thing I'm doing, the thing I'm like very stoked about right now, I started this group called Fun Facts during the pandemic with my three friends, Susie, Mike, and Matt. I mean, this is like all kind of like New York City scene stuff. Like we've all been playing in the scene for forever. I moved here in 2012, and we've all basically been playing in different combinations with each other since 2012, but never in like a super collaborative way. This project was like something that came out of the pandemic. We basically like became each other's like music pod and just started like jamming like every week at Susie's place. And then through like what I can only describe as like true magic, we just sort of accidentally, through jamming, like created like this extremely robust catalog of songs that I think are just like excellent. Like I'm very proud of them. They like from it's the first time I've ever had like an experience where improvisation really created an intricate compositional structure. So that's what I'm doing now, and we're getting ready to release a record called Apartment Rock by the end of this year. It's coming out on November 22nd, and it's 9 of the songs that came from this like this sort of like magical jam ritual that we all were involved in. And it's sort of, the way I think of it, it's like it's a rock record. It's like very much like bass, guitar, keys, drums, and then me, Matt, and Susie all sing on it. And we kind of like go between like it's, I think it's sort of like, it's definitely got, you know, like, as I'm sure you guys would expect from me after this conversation, it's got like tons of Anko influence for sure, but it's also got like these tones of Stereolab, Yola Tango, and like Matt has this like really sick kind of evil B-52 song on it that I'm like really stoked for people to hear. But it's just like a squiggly rock record. We all like wrote it together. We all have songs that we're like taking the leads on, and on each song I think it's just like you can really hear like it's just like a cool experience. I mean, I'm not to like indulge in myself too much, but I've never been a part of something where I felt such an true like collectivist vibe to the way the music was created. And perhaps that's like, you know, for me at least, the Animal Collective vibe sneaking in and influencing me, and the way I approach things. But like the whole experience for all four of us was just like, I mean, I can't really emphasize enough how accidental it was. Like, I don't think any of us went into it thinking we're going to write songs and we're going to start a band. We were just like lonely and desperate for music in the pandemic and just started jamming and somehow started writing some of the best songs that I think, I don't want to speak for the others, but some of the best songs I feel like I've ever been a part of. And I think they would say that too. I mean, it's a really special batch of music. I'm really stoked about it.
Awesome. Well, then I hope that everyone listening checks it out on November 22nd. Did you pick JFK's assassination date purposefully, or is that just a coincidence?
Magical coincidence. Okay. I'm a slightly conspiratorially minded, but the conspiracy here is that I did not know. It just the forces that be forced me to make this decision. And I should say we have 2 singles coming out too. If you want to check them out before the record release, we have one called "Walking the Dead," which is a very appropriately Halloweeny song coming out on October 25th. And then one called "Sat at the Gym," which is like our like Stereo Lab on Crack song coming out on November 8th.
Sweet.
Yeah, we're the content's coming out.
Yeah, it's really good. I did listen to it this morning actually before this cast, and I gotta say, like, you can definitely hear so many influences in there, but you are kind of creating your own thing, and I love the interplay between the different voices. There's also kind of like, are you a fan of Grizzly Bear? I feel like that definitely like came through a little bit in the sonic qualities as well.
Definitely. I think me and Matt, I definitely need to start name dropping them more, because for me and Matt's the drummer and one of the singers in the band. Like, we used to work at a cafe together, and I think we'd play Yellow House like every other day that we were working together. We were just like huge Grizzly Bear heads. Yeah, their sense of like pastoral orchestration is like endlessly inspirational to me, especially Yellow House. That record is just like such a next level record to me.
Well, only a true Animal Collective fan can make an album after jamming in a room with friends. So
it's true.
Jordan and I would definitely be a lot more productive with our stuff if we were in the same room ever.
I'm terrible in that I always love to invite myself along to cool plans. So I would like to invite myself along to this cool plan if it manifests.
Hey,
you're invited.
It's totally understandable. We're all adults. It's hard to make friends.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, you guys, you guys are my first friends.
Oh, geez.
Do you feel the same way? Do you feel the same way? You feel the same way, right?
Well, thanks for listening to this episode of A Musician and a Filmmaker. We were joined by our guest, Ethan Woods. We'll be back with Oddsack, the one and only. Check out Fun Facts and their album, Apartment Rock, on November 22nd, 2024, the year of our Lord. And we appreciate the patronage. And don't forget, speaking of patronage, don't forget to sign up for our Patreon and pay us $25 a month. We're only going to release half of the episodes. So if you want to hear the full-length episodes, you need to pay us money for a free podcast. Because we're obviously important and famous, and we desire monetary compensation. So
deserve it. We deserve it. We deserve
with all the hours that have been put in. I mean, God, can you imagine entertaining people for free? Ugh.
Never.
Anyway, thanks for watching.